Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about sensation and perception. There are different types of energy surrounding us: electromagnetic, radiation, pressure, vibrations, and molecules, and mechanical forces. However, it doesn't matter what happens around us, and even though we might sense these energies, if our senses won't translate these forces into a form our brains can understand, we will experience only a void of silence and darkness. The primary function of the senses is to act as biological transducers, devices that convert one kind of energy into another. And information arriving from the sense organs creates sensations. Then the brain processes these messages, these sensations. When the brain organizes sensations into meaningful patterns, perception occurs. So for example, our ear detects sound vibrations, so that's the sensation, but it's the job of our brain to transcribe these messages, the sound vibrations, into something we can understand, like speech, words, letters, etc. There is considerable selection regarding which information we sense and which we don't. This is primarily because sensory receptors do not transduce all the energies they encounter. The eye transduces light energy, the ear transduces sound waves, etc. Many other types of stimuli cannot be sensed directly because we lack sensory receptors to transduce their energy. Additional elements that impact whether a sensation occurs or not is whether the energy emitted from the sound surpasses the absolute threshold for a sensation to occur. So very soft sounds might not be heard by a human being because they fall below the absolute threshold. Another way the flow of sensations to the brain is reduced is via sensory adaptation. When there is unchanging stimuli, sensory receptors respond less because there's no new information for them to pick up on. They kind of don't take in that new information. Our experiences also are influenced by sensory analysis. Sensory analysis is the separation of sensory information into important elements using perceptual features, such as lines, shapes, edges, spots, colors, and even other patterns. So for example, you can easily find the vertical line among the diagonal lines. This is called visual pop-up effect. Our sensitivity to perceptual features is an innate characteristic of the nervous system. It is also influenced by experience early in life. So it is both biological and environmental influenced by. For example, cats raised with vertical stripes, so cats that were in rooms where the wallpaper was just vertical stripes, there were no horizontal surfaces, just everything vertical. All the elements were vertical. They were actually blind to horizontal lines and had difficulty jumping to horizontal surfaces. So they were able to see it in the basic sense of a word, but they were not able to perceive it. Similarly, cats raised with horizontal stripes or horizontal surfaces were blind to vertical lines and vertical furniture or elements, and consequently had difficulty not bumping into chair legs that were vertical because they could not perceive them. Selective attention is voluntarily focusing on a specific sensory input. Selective attention is based on the ability of brain structures to select and sense incoming sensory messages. Inattentional blindness is the failure to notice a stimulus because the attention is focused elsewhere. So when you're driving and using a cell phone, your attention is directed towards the individual on the phone or on the process of texting rather than the car in front of you. Please stop the lecture right now and check out the YouTube clip that illustrates inattentional blindness perfectly. Cocktail party effect is the automated selective attention. So for example, imagine you're in a big party, a lot of people talking, and you're conversing with one particular individual. Though you are paying attention to hopefully, to what that individual in front of you is saying, if somebody relatively even far away, as long as you can actually hear, says your name, you will automatically, almost, will pay attention to that. Another very interesting element of sensory processing is change blindness. And change blindness is when you fail to notice a change between attentional shifts. Please stop the lecture right now and check out the YouTube clip on change blindness. Okay, so now we're gonna move from talking about sensory processes to perceptual processes. How do we organize sensations into perceptions? Well, visual perception, for example, involves finding meaningful patterns in complex stimuli. Our brain creates our perceptions by using pre-existing knowledge such as the principles of perceptual grouping and perceptual constancies to help us make sense out of the sensations. We don't passively record the events and stimuli around us. We actually actively construct meaningful perceptions. Perceptual constructions are mental models of external events, and they are actively created by our brains. In other words, our sensory information can be interpreted in various ways. An illusion is a misleading or misconstrued perception. In an illusion, length, position, motion, curvature, or direction is consistently misjudged. So for example, this picture illustrates the well-known illusion by the name of the Ames room. From the front of the room looks normal. However, in reality, the right-hand corner is very short, and the left-hand corner is very tall. In addition, the left side of the room slants away from the viewers. But there's an illusion that there's a giant woman who is about to attack this tiny man. Our perceptions can be constructed using both bottom-up and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing is organizing perceptions by beginning with low-level features. So we start with small sensory units and build upward to a more complete perception. It is usually when you see something new and you need to pick it out by the parts. So if you're presented with an iPhone for the first time ever, you will more likely to process it bottom up, especially if your encounter with cell phones was minimal to that encounter. Top-down processing is when you apply higher level knowledge to rapidly organize sensory information into a meaningful perception. So we take our pre-existing knowledge and use it to organize features into a meaningful whole. So not knowing what letter it is when, the doctor scribbled something on the notepad, but we can understand what that letter is or even what that word is from the context. That would be a top-down processing. Another example, you can see this lady and you can kind of see that something might be weird about this picture, but in general, processing it top-down, it looks fine. However, not so fun. This one, if you were needed to evaluate the picture using bottom-up processing, so starting with the small features and processing it until you get kind of the big picture, you most likely won't be able to do that. Starting with the features, you won't be able to get to the big picture thing using what is shown in this picture. However, if you use top-down processing, so if you use your pre-existing knowledge, and now I'm going to tell you your pre-existing knowledge. So, for example, there's a cow in this picture. Now you're most likely to see it. You can identify its eyes, its ears, its nose potentially, and you pretty much won't be able to unsee it now. A stimulus may offer, however, conflicting information that perceptual organization becomes impossible. So, for example, if you look at this picture, at this side, it will look like it has two handles, so to speak. Maybe it's a magnet. If you look at this side, it looks like it has three pronged wedge. And it makes sense. Okay, maybe you're not so familiar with this tool, but it makes sense. However, how about now? A problem arises when you try to organize the entire drawing. A conflicting sensory information prevents us from constructing a stable perception of this object. A very important perceptual process is depth perception, which is the ability to see space and to actually judge distances. Studies done with a visual cliff suggest that depth perception is partially learned and partially innate. In other words, it is something that we are both born with, but also something that we learn from our environment. So, for example, a research study took 6 to 14-month-old infants and put them in the shallow side and of this box, kind of what you're looking at. And even though their mothers try and trick them into a minor bungee jump, they wouldn't go. They would stay in that, to what they perceive was the shallow side. So what it says is that the children, the infants, even as young as 6 to 14 years old, understand depth perception and kind of know, oh, no, I shouldn't go there. I can fall and hurt myself. So if your parents ever told you were dropped from a bed or a changing table as a baby, please know the issue was not your lack of depth perception, but rather your lack of coordination. Or, well, your parents' coordination. I'm going to pause here and start a new lecture slide presentation